The little girl's cries had been getting weaker for days. Mr. Carson pressed his ear against the shared wall, heart breaking. His neighbors had locked the foster child in the basement. He was sure of it. When the screaming stopped completely, he knew she was dying. He made one call to his nephew Jake. 2 hours later, 300 Hell's Angels motorcycles filled the street, engines roaring. But no one expected what they'd find in that basement. If this story moves your heart, please like and share your thoughts below. Every voice matters in protecting the innocent. Sophie Adams was 5 years old and had been in the system her entire life. Her mother died in childbirth, father unknown. She'd bounced through 7 foster homes before landing with Mark and Diane Fletcher in Cedar Hills, a quiet suburb where people minded their own business. The Fletchers seemed perfect on paper. Stable income, nice house, clean background checks. Child Services was thrilled to place Sophie there 3 months ago. What they didn't see was the monster behind closed doors. Mark Fletcher was a cruel man who saw foster kids as paychecks. Diane was his enabler, too weak to stop him and too complicit to leave. They'd had 3 other foster children over the years, all removed quietly when neighbors complained of screaming, but the system was overwhelmed and the Fletchers knew how to pass inspections. Sophie's crime was wetting the bed. 5 years old, traumatized, and she'd had an accident. Mark's punishment was disproportionate and evil. He dragged her to the basement, threw her inside, and locked the door. "You stay down there until you learn," he snarled. "Animals live in cages." That was 6 days ago. The basement was cold, damp, and dark. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, but Mark had removed it. Sophie had a bucket for a toilet, a thin blanket, and once a day, Diane would crack the door and throw down stale bread and a bottle of water. Sophie cried the first 2 days, screamed for help, but the basement was below ground, insulated, and no one heard. By day 3, she was too weak to scream. By day 5, she barely moved. On day 6, she stopped crying altogether. Next door, 74-year-old Harold Carson heard everything. His house shared a wall with the Fletcher basement. For days, he'd heard a child crying. He'd knocked on the Fletcher's door twice, asking if everything was okay. "Our daughter's sick," Mark said smoothly. "Flu. She's dramatic." But Harold was a Korean War veteran. He'd seen evil. He knew the difference between sickness and suffering. When the crying stopped on day 6, Harold's gut twisted. That silence was worse than screaming. It meant surrender. It meant death was close. Harold had one nephew he trusted with serious problems, Jake Reaper Carson, member of the Hell's Angels. Jake was tough, loyal, and didn't tolerate injustice. Harold called him at 9 p.m. "Jake, I need you. Now. I think the neighbors are killing a kid." Jake was at Harold's house in 20 minutes. Harold explained everything. The crying, the silence, the Fletcher's lies. "You call the cops?" 3 times. They do welfare checks. Fletchers show them a clean house, say the girl's with relatives. Cops leave. System's broken, Jake. Jake's jaw tightened. He knew Harold wasn't dramatic. If he said a kid was dying, a kid was dying. "Let me make some calls." Within an hour, word spread through the local chapter. Within 2 hours, 300 Hell's Angels descended on Cedar Hills like an army. They lined the street, motorcycles gleaming under streetlights. Silent, menacing, a wall of leather and chrome. Neighbors came out terrified. "What's happening?" Jake stood at the Fletcher's door and pounded. "Mark Fletcher, open up!" No answer. "We know about the girl. Open this door or we're coming through." Inside, Mark panicked. He looked out the window at 300 bikers. His face went pale. "Diane, get the girl. Clean her up now." But it was too late. Jake nodded to 2 brothers, hammer and blade. They kicked the door in with one synchronized strike. The Fletchers screamed, "You can't! This is breaking and entering!" "Call the cops," Jake said coldly. "Please, call them." Diane ran for her phone. Within minutes, sirens wailed. But the bikers didn't move. They weren't leaving until that child was found. Sheriff Tom Bradley arrived with 6 deputies prepared for a riot. Instead, he found 300 bikers standing silently and Harold Carson on his porch, pointing at the Fletcher house. "Sheriff, They got a little girl locked in the basement, been there almost a week. Mark Fletcher emerged, trying to appear calm. These criminals broke into my home. Arrest them. Where's your foster daughter? Sheriff Bradley asked. With relatives. Don't lie to me, Mark. Where's Sophie Adams? The Fletchers hesitated too long. Bradley's expression hardened. Open the basement now. You need a warrant. Exigent circumstances, child in danger. Open it or I arrest you for obstruction. Diane's hands shook as she unlocked the basement door. The smell hit everyone first. Urine, feces, decay. Then they heard it. A weak whimper. Bradley descended with a flashlight. What he found would haunt him forever. Sophie lay on the concrete floor, skeletal and filthy. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, eyes sunken. She'd soiled herself days ago and lay in it. Dehydrated, malnourished, hypothermic. Bradley scooped her up, tears streaming. Get an ambulance, now! Jake saw the tiny body in Bradley's arms, and rage exploded through him. He turned toward Mark Fletcher. Harold grabbed his arm. Not like this, Jake, not in front of her. Jake forced himself to breathe. Harold was right. Sophie needed help, not revenge. The paramedics arrived and worked frantically. Sophie's vitals were critical. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, possible kidney failure. They rushed her to the hospital, sirens blaring. The Fletchers were arrested on the spot. Child abuse, neglect, attempted murder. The charges would multiply. But Jake and the 300 bikers didn't leave. They stayed all night, engines idling. A vigil for a little girl who'd been forgotten by everyone except one old veteran and his nephew. At Cedar Hills General Hospital, doctors fought to save Sophie. IV fluids, warming blankets, medications. She'd been close to death. Another day, and they'd be planning a funeral. Jake sat in the waiting room, surrounded by his brothers. Hammer approached. Cops are processing the Fletchers. DA's talking felony charges. They're going away for years. Not enough, Jake said quietly. Agreed, but it's something. Sheriff Bradley emerged from the ER. She's stable. Critical but stable. Doctors say she's tough. Can we see her? Bradley hesitated. Why? You don't know her. We're the ones who saved her. I think we've earned the right. Bradley considered, then nodded. 5 minutes. Don't overwhelm her. Jake entered the pediatric ward alone. Sophie lay in a bed that swallowed her tiny frame. Tubes and wires connected her to machines. Her eyes were closed. Jake sat carefully beside the bed. Hey there, little one. My name's Jake. You're safe now. Nobody's ever gonna hurt you again, I promise. Sophie's eyes fluttered open, huge brown eyes that had seen too much suffering. She stared at Jake with fear and confusion. It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm here to make sure you're protected. Who are you? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm a friend. My Uncle Harold heard you crying. He called me. We came to help. The loud motorcycles. Yeah, those were my brothers. We wanted the bad people to know we weren't leaving until you were safe. Sophie's lip trembled. Are Mark and Diane gone? They're in jail. They can't hurt you anymore. Tears streamed down Sophie's face. I was so scared. I thought I was going to die down there. Jake felt his throat tighten. But you didn't. You survived. You're strong, Sophie. I'm not strong. I'm just a kid. Strongest kid I know. You held on when most people would have given up. A nurse entered to check Sophie's vitals. She needs rest. You can come back tomorrow. Jake stood. I'll be here. Every day until you're better. And then we'll figure out what happens next. What happens next? Sophie asked, fear creeping back. Jake didn't have an answer. She'd go back into the system. Another foster home. Maybe a good one. Maybe another nightmare. Unless... Outside, Jake gathered his brothers. We need to do something. She can't go back into the system. It failed her. Dow, what are you suggesting? Hammer asked. I don't know yet, but we can't just ride away. Over the next week, the bikers became fixtures at the hospital. They took shifts sitting with Sophie so she was never alone. They brought stuffed animals, books, and gifts. Tough men who'd lived hard lives learned to make a 5-year-old smile. Sophie began opening up. She told them about the other foster homes, some okay, some terrible, about feeling unwanted and disposable. Every time I think I found a home, they send me away, she said quietly. Nobody wants me. That's not true, Jake insisted. We want you, all of us, but you're motorcycle people. You can't keep me. Why not? Because that's not how it works. But Jake was already researching. Could a Hell's Angel become a foster parent? Adopt a child? It seemed impossible. Criminal records, lifestyle, reputation. But Jake had been clean for 5 years. He had a steady job as a mechanic, owned his own shop. He was stable. He made an appointment with Child Services caseworker Linda Martinez. Mr. Carson, I appreciate your concern for Sophie, but I want to foster her, eventually adopt her. Linda blinked. You're a member of a motorcycle club. I'm also a business owner with no recent criminal record, a stable home, and 300 people willing to support this child. That's more than most foster parents can offer. The system doesn't usually approve. The system locked her in a basement for 6 days and didn't notice. Maybe the system needs to try something different. Linda was silent. She'd seen the photos from the Fletcher basement, read Sophie's medical reports, knew the system had failed catastrophically. I'll need background checks, home inspections, references. You'll have everything. I'm serious about this. Why? You don't know her. Because she deserves someone who won't give up on her. And I won't. The background check process took 3 weeks. Jake's record was reviewed. Minor offenses from his youth, nothing recent or violent. His business was inspected, legitimate and profitable. References poured in. Harold, Sheriff Bradley, community members who'd seen the biker's vigil. Most surprisingly, Sophie was interviewed by a child psychologist. Who do you want to live with, Sophie? Jake and his friends. They make me feel safe. Do they scare you? They're pretty tough looking. They scare bad people, but they're nice to me. Jake reads me stories. Hammer taught me to draw. Blade brings me ice cream, even though nurses say I can't have too much. The psychologist's report was glowing. Sophie has bonded with Jake Carson and the motorcycle club members. They've provided consistent support during her recovery, unconventional but effective. Linda Martinez approved emergency foster placement. Jake was now officially Sophie's foster parent. The day Sophie left the hospital, 300 bikers were waiting. Not on motorcycles, that would be overwhelming, but standing in a line outside, each one high-fiving Sophie as Jake carried her to his truck. You're our little sister now, Hammer told her. We got your back, always. Sophie beamed, the first real smile in months. Jake's house was modest, but he'd prepared. The spare bedroom was transformed. Pink walls, new bed, stuffed animals everywhere. It's not much, but it's yours. Forever yours. Sophie hugged him. It's perfect. Life with Jake was an adjustment. He was learning to be a parent, cooking meals a kid would eat, dealing with nightmares, helping with bath time, awkwardly with the door open and a female club member named Rita supervising to keep everything appropriate. The club rallied. Rita and other women members taught Jake about girls' needs, hair care, clothes, emotional support. Male members taught Sophie that men could be safe, that big and tough didn't mean mean. Sophie started therapy for her trauma. Dr. Sarah Klein was impressed by the support system. Most kids in her situation are alone. Sophie has an army. School was harder. Kids stared at the girl whose foster parents tried to kill her. Some parents didn't want their kids near her. Bad luck, trouble. But when bullies targeted Sophie, calling her basement girl, Jake got a call from the principal. Mr. Carson, there's been an incident. Jake arrived to find Sophie crying in the office, and 3 boys with guilty expressions. What happened? These boys were teasing Sophie. She defended herself. She hit them? Jake was shocked. Sophie was tiny and gentle. No, she told them her 300 uncles wouldn't appreciate it, then showed them this. The principal held up Sophie's phone. The background was a photo of her surrounded by Hell's Angels, all making silly faces. Jake bit back a smile. That's my girl. The bullying stopped immediately. Months passed. Jake's foster license became permanent. He started adoption proceedings. Sophie thrived, gaining weight, laughing, playing. The nightmares decreased. One evening, Sophie climbed into Jake's lap during a movie. "Jake?" "Yeah, kiddo." "Can I call you Dad?" Jake's vision blurred. "You sure? That's a big word. You do dad stuff. You love me. That makes you my dad." Jake hugged her tight. "Then yeah, you can call me Dad. I'd be honored." The adoption was finalized 6 months after the rescue. Sophie Adams became Sophie Carson. Judge Williams smiled. "I've presided over hundreds of adoptions, but this one's special. Mr. Carson, you took a broken child and gave her family. Not just you, an entire community. That's remarkable." The courtroom was packed with bikers. When the judge announced the adoption was complete, they erupted in cheers. Outside, the celebration was legendary. 300 bikers escorted Sophie and Jake through town in a parade. Local shops donated gifts. The police escorted them, Sheriff Bradley grinning the whole time. At the club compound, they threw a party. Sophie, now 6, wore a tiny leather vest with Princess embroidered on the back. She ran around playing with club kids. Finally, just a normal child. Harold approached Jake, tears in his eyes. "Your parents would be proud. You saved that little girl." "We saved each other, Uncle. I needed her as much as she needed me." As the sun set, Sophie found Jake sitting alone. "What are you thinking about?" "About how close we came to losing you, if Uncle Harold hadn't called." "But he did, and you came. 300 motorcycles." She giggled. "Mark and Diane must have been so scared." "They should be. They're in prison for 15 years. Won't hurt anyone again." "Good." Sophie's expression turned serious. "Dad? There were other kids, in different houses. Mark and Diane told me. Other people doing the same thing." Jake felt ice in his veins. "What?" "A whole network. People who take foster kids for money, but hurt them. Mark said they were too smart to get caught, but they got caught because of me." Jake immediately called Linda Martinez. "We need to talk. Sophie just told me something huge." The investigation that followed uncovered a horrifying truth. The Fletchers were part of a ring of abusive foster parents, coordinated and protected by a corrupt caseworker who falsified reports. 12 homes, 23 children. Sophie's testimony and her courage brought down the entire operation. Every child was removed and placed in genuine, vetted homes. The corrupt caseworker got 20 years, the abusive parents faced decades in prison, and Sophie became a hero, the little girl whose suffering exposed evil and saved dozens of other kids. But to Jake and the club, she was just Sophie, their daughter, their sister, their family. The girl they'd locked in a basement thinking no one cared. But 300 motorcycles proved otherwise. Sometimes heroes wear leather and ride Harleys, and sometimes a 5-year-old's courage changes everything. The investigation into the foster care abuse ring took 6 months. Sophie's testimony was crucial, but prosecutors worried about putting a 6-year-old on the stand. The defense would attack her credibility, and reliving trauma could damage her recovery. Jake sat with Sophie and Dr. Klein. "Sweetheart, you don't have to testify if you don't want to. The police have other evidence." Sophie's jaw set with determination that reminded Jake of himself. "Those people hurt kids like me. If I don't talk, they might not go to jail. I have to. You're so brave. You taught me that. You and Uncle Harold and all my uncles. Brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." The trial became national news. "Child exposes foster care abuse ring" topped headlines. Media camped outside the courthouse. Jake and the club formed a protective barrier, escorting Sophie in and out. On the stand, Sophie was remarkable. Small but fierce, she described her time in the Fletcher basement without crying. When the defense attorney tried to confuse her, she looked him dead in the eye. "You're trying to make me sound like a liar, but I was there, in the dark, alone. Starving. I know what happened." The jury was in tears. The attorney backed down. All 12 defendants were convicted. The Fletchers got 25 years. The corrupt caseworker got 30. Others received sentences ranging from 15 to 40 years. Outside the courthouse, Sophie stood between Jake and Harold while hundreds of bikers lined the steps. News cameras captured the moment. "I want to say something," Sophie announced. Jake knelt beside her. "You sure?" "Yeah." Sophie faced the cameras. "Bad people hurt me and other kids, but good people saved us. My dad, Jake, and the Hells Angels showed me that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up, protecting people who can't protect themselves, and never giving up. If you see someone who needs help, help them. Be brave. Be kind, that's all." The footage went viral. Sophie became a symbol of resilience and courage. But more importantly, it sparked reform, stricter oversight of foster care, better vetting of adoptive parents, more resources for children. Sophie's impact reached far beyond one courtroom. Life settled into normalcy, or as normal as life could be for a girl with 300 biker uncles. Sophie excelled in school, made friends, and joined soccer. Jake learned to braid hair, badly, but Sophie appreciated the effort and attended every school event. Rita became Sophie's honorary aunt, teaching her girl stuff Jake couldn't handle. Hammer taught her to draw. She had real talent. Blade taught her self-defense, so you never feel helpless again. But nightmares still came. Sophie would wake screaming, remembering the basement. Jake would hold her until the fear passed. "Will I ever forget?" she asked one night. "No, but it gets quieter. The bad memories lose power when you fill your life with good ones." One afternoon, Sophie came home from school excited. "Dad, we're doing family history projects. I want to do ours." Jake smiled. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How you and the club started. Why you rode to save me. How we became family." They spent weeks on the project. Sophie interviewed Harold about calling Jake. She interviewed club members about that night, why they came, what they felt seeing her rescued. Hammer told her, "We came because family protects family, and once we heard about you, you were family." The presentation at school was powerful. Sophie showed photos, 300 bikes lining the street, Jake holding her at the hospital, the Adoption Day celebration. She explained what the Hells Angels really were, not criminals, but a brotherhood that stood for loyalty and protection. Her teacher gave her an A+. Several parents apologized for judging the bikers. One father, a lawyer, approached Jake after. "I misjudged you and your club. What you did for Sophie is remarkable. If you ever need legal help, call me." Jake was learning that respect was earned through actions, not words. 2 years after the rescue, Sophie was 7 and thriving, but Harold's health was declining. At 76, he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Treatment wasn't working. Sophie visited him daily, reading to him and holding his hand. "Uncle Harold, you have to get better." Harold smiled weakly. "Sweetheart, I'm old. My body's tired, but I got to see you safe and happy, that's enough. But I need you. You got Jake. And 300 uncles. And you're strong enough now to stand on your own." Harold passed peacefully with Sophie and Jake beside him. The funeral was massive. Veterans, bikers, community members. Sophie gave a eulogy that left everyone in tears. "Uncle Harold saved my life. He heard me crying when no one else did. He didn't ignore it. He called my dad and started everything. Because of him, I'm alive. I have a family. I'm happy. That's the best thing anyone can do, help someone who needs it. Uncle Harold taught me that. I'll never forget him." They buried Harold with full military honors. The Hells Angels provided escort, 200 bikes following the hearse. Sophie placed her favorite drawing on his casket, a picture of Harold as a superhero. "Because that's what you were," she whispered. Jake inherited Harold's house but couldn't bear to sell it. Instead, he turned it into something meaningful, a safe house for kids escaping abuse. Harold's Haven became a refuge where children could stay temporarily while authorities investigated their situations. Sophie helped design it, picking colors, choosing toys, making welcome baskets. "Every kid should feel safe like I do now." The club funded it entirely. They ran background checks on volunteers, installed security, and provided 24/7 protection. Within a year, Harold's Haven had helped 32 children. Sophie was directly involved. She talked to scared kids, sharing her story. "I was in a basement for 6 days. I thought I'd die, but I didn't. You won't either. These people will protect you. Trust them like I did." Her compassion was extraordinary, turning her trauma into a mission to help others. At 8 years old, Sophie spoke at a foster care reform conference. Standing before hundreds of social workers, legislators, and advocates, she was poised and powerful. I was failed by the system multiple times, but I was saved by people who refused to look away. We need better oversight, better training, better consequences for abusers. And we need to listen to kids. We know when something's wrong. Believe us. Standing ovation. Legislation was proposed based on her testimony, Sophie's Law, requiring more frequent unannounced home visits and making it easier for neighbors to report suspected abuse. The bill passed. Sophie attended the signing ceremony, standing beside the governor as he made her recommendations law. Jake watched with pride. His little girl, the one he'd found nearly dead in a basement, was changing the world, but Sophie remained humble. At home, she was just a kid, doing homework, playing with friends, arguing about bedtime. Jake wouldn't have it any other way. One evening, Sophie found Jake looking at photos from that first night. 300 bikes, police lights, the chaos. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How close we came to losing you. If Uncle Harold hadn't called." "But he did. And you came. You all came." Sophie climbed into his lap. "Dad, do you ever regret adopting me?" "I know I'm a lot of work." Jake hugged her tight. "Sophie Carson, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Before you, I was just riding through life. No purpose, no direction. You gave me meaning. I should be thanking you. We saved each other then." "Yeah, kiddo, we did." 5 years after the rescue, Sophie was 10 and had become a national advocate for child welfare. She'd written a book, From Darkness to Light, My Story, with proceeds funding child abuse prevention programs. But her favorite role was still just being Jake's daughter and the Hells Angels' little sister. The club threw a massive celebration for the 5-year anniversary of her rescue. 500 bikers attended, chapters from across the country coming to honor the girl who'd changed their reputation forever. People no longer saw Hells Angels as criminals. They saw the club that saved Sophie, that ran Harold's Haven, that advocated for children. Sophie stood on stage, now confident and articulate. 5 years ago, I was dying in a basement. Today, I'm surrounded by family. My dad, Jake, taught me that strength isn't about being big or tough. It's about showing up when people need you. The Hells Angels showed up for me. They show up for lots of kids now. And I want to keep showing up for others too. The roar from 500 bikers shook the ground. Later, Jake and Sophie sat on their porch, watching the sunset. "Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. What happens when I grow up? Will I still be part of the club?" Jake smiled. "You'll always be family, whether you ride with us or not. But Sophie, you're gonna do amazing things, bigger than this club. You're gonna change the world. I just want to help kids like me. Then you'll do exactly that, and we'll support you every step." Sophie leaned against him. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo, more than anything." Over the next years, Sophie continued her advocacy work. At 12, she launched a non-profit, Voices for the Voiceless, giving abused children platforms to share their stories and access to resources. At 15, she testified before Congress about strengthening child protection laws. At 17, she gave a TED Talk that went viral, The Basement That Changed Everything. Through it all, Jake was there. Every speech, every interview, every moment. And behind him, 300 bikers who'd once descended on a quiet suburb to save one little girl. Sophie graduated high school with honors, accepted to multiple prestigious universities, but her choice surprised everyone. She enrolled at the local community college. "Why?" Jake asked. "You could go anywhere." "Because I want to stay close. Keep working at Harold's Haven. Keep helping kids here. The fancy schools can wait." Jake understood. Sophie had found her purpose, not in accolades or prestige, but in direct action helping others. At 20, Sophie became a licensed social worker, specializing in trauma and foster care. She revolutionized the local system, implementing oversight programs and training based on her own experiences. Mark and Diane Fletcher were up for parole after 15 years. Sophie attended the hearing, now an adult. She spoke against their release. These people locked a 5-year-old in a basement and left her to die. They showed no remorse. They were part of a network that abused dozens of children. Society is safer with them incarcerated. Parole denied. Outside, Jake waited with Hammer and other club members, grayer now, but still family. "You okay?" Jake asked. "Yeah, facing them again. It was hard, but necessary. They don't get to hurt anyone else." "Proud of you, kiddo," Sophie smiled. "Learned from the best." That evening, the club gathered at Harold's Haven for its 10-year anniversary celebration. The house had helped over 300 children. Many returned to volunteer, giving back like Sophie did. One teen approached Sophie. "Ms. Carson, I was here 5 years ago, escaping my stepfather. You talked to me, told me I'd survive. I did. I'm in college now, studying to be a teacher because of you." Sophie hugged her. "Because of you. You chose to keep going. That's all you." Jake watched his daughter, no longer the broken 5-year-old, but a powerful woman changing lives. She'd turned her trauma into purpose, her pain into protection for others. As the party wound down, Sophie found Jake on the porch. "Remember when you first brought me here? I was so scared. Didn't think I'd ever feel safe again. And now I know what safe feels like, and I spend every day making sure other kids feel it too." Jake pulled her into a hug. "Your Uncle Harold would be so proud. I'm so proud. I had good teachers, a whole motorcycle club of them." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge. In the distance, motorcycles rumbled, new members arriving for a club meeting. The sound that once terrified a neighborhood now meant safety and protection. Sophie thought about her journey, from an abandoned orphan to a voice for the voiceless, from a victim to a survivor to a warrior for children everywhere. All because one old veteran refused to ignore a child's cries. All because 300 bikers said enough and took over a street. All because one man chose to become a father to a broken little girl. "Dad," Sophie said softly, "thank you for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for teaching me to be strong." Jake's voice was thick with emotion. "Sophie, you saved me just as much. Maybe more. You gave me purpose, a family, a reason to be better. Thank you for choosing me. Always. You're my hero. And you're mine, kiddo. Always have been." They sat together as darkness deepened, a father and daughter forged, not by blood but by choice, courage, and love. Behind them, Harold's Haven glowed with warm light, a beacon for lost children, showing them the way home. The story of the girl in the basement had a happy ending, not because someone rescued her, but because she chose to turn her rescue into a mission, saving others, giving voice to the silenced, and proving that heroism comes in all forms. Sometimes it wears leather and rides motorcycles. Sometimes it's a 5-year-old girl refusing to give up in the darkness. And sometimes it's the beautiful family they build together from the ashes of trauma. Sophie Carson, survivor, advocate, hero, stood as proof that the worst moments in life don't define us. What we do after them does. And what Sophie did was extraordinary. The end of her childhood story, but just the beginning of her legacy.